My name is Jean Van Sinderen Law. I'm the Director of Development and Alumni Relations at University College Cork. And today we celebrate the UCC Alumni Achievement Awards 2013. And I have the pleasure of being in the company here of one of the recipients of a recipient of one of those awards tonight, Dr. Patrick O'Leary. Pat is going to get the award from the College of Medicine and Health. So Pat, you are very, very welcome back to your alma mater.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you very much.
Tell me, where do you come from?
Well, I grew up in West Cork in Baltimore, and went to school, international school in Baltimore, and then I went to high school in Skibbereen, De La Salle School, and then I came to UCC there afterwards.
And what prompted you to come to UCC?
Well, I wanted to do postgraduate studies, and I was planning to come to do chemistry and physics. And on the way back from my summer job in London, I stopped to see my uncle, who was a previous medical graduate at UCC, and he was a GP in Wales, and I spent a weekend with him. He never once suggested I should do medicine, but the impact of seeing him on the way back from Dublin to Cork on the train that fall, I reconsidered, and I went home to my mom and said, "Mom, I'm thinking maybe of switching and doing medicine instead." And then she said, "Well, go talk to Brother John in Skibbereen, the high school master, and ask what he thinks." In the meantime, my dad was working in London in those years, so my dad was, that's why I was in London for a summer job. And
what was your dad doing there, Pat?
He was working in a factory in London. Yeah, they were the Dubilier condenser company, and it was basically on a factory line.
Okay.
He left home when I was about 10, because he was a shoemaker in Skibbereen before that time. And the income that he had then was less than we pay for newspapers right now on a weekly basis.
Gosh, when you think of it.
It's changed of times, yeah. So Brother John in Skibbereen suggested to me that medicine would be far better than science for me. He recommended strongly I would do medicine. So I came to University College Cork to meet the registrar. At the time it was Ty Carey. So Ty said, "What are you here for?" And I said, "I'm here to sign on for medicine." He said, "Medicine is much too difficult. You're better off to study arts." And I never knew to this day whether he was advising me or teasing me. I never found out. But he provoked me I should only study arts because medicine was hard to graduate from. That was his recommendation at that time. So needless to say, he didn't block me, obviously, and I signed on to medicine, and then I went into pre-med. And so the story unfolds from there.
And was it a huge transition for you to come from where you were in school in West Cork to come to UCC in those days?
Well, the beauty of the education we had at the De La Salle Christian Brothers was that we had 5 years of biology, physics, and chemistry. So we actually became a distinct advantage because pre-med was physics, chemistry, botany, and zoology. So we had 5 years of that in Skibbereen. So we were very well prepared for pre-med and very fortunate, yeah. We didn't know at the time. I did not realize that other students in pre-med had never had that background in high school. So they were struggling for the first time to learn basic stuff that we had covered. With very good teachers.
Did you find when you came to UCC and studying those subjects, did you actually find it came easy to you as a result of your secondary school education?
I assumed that it was easy for me because I didn't have any problem with the testings, and that year it was fine, and I didn't. It was the courses were just a little bit more advanced than we had in high school, but basically biology was biology, chemistry was chemistry, physics was physics, and it was just more advanced. But we already had the groundwork, so it made life easier. But I didn't realize initially that a lot of students didn't have that background.
Okay.
And so
you kind of it went well for you. Did you do things outside of studying while you were at the university? Did you participate in sport or had you time?
The first year I played football, Gaelic football, and I just had to go down to West Cork to play some of the games. And then my friends over here were playing rugby. And those years, rugby was not kind of allowed for the country folk that were supposed to stick with the Gaelic games because it was a ban going on those years. So I never switched into the rugby mode. And then I thought, if I'm here, I may as well study. So I decided to put the football aside and study. Okay. That was my focus.
And looking back on those, on your years here, were there, I suppose, lecturers or anybody who particularly influenced you or who taught you lessons really that set you up for life?
I think one thing was interesting, Professor McHenry was our physics teacher. And later on, he became president of the university. And some of those years, we were studying in the library, the medical library. And there was a very loud typewriter at the library. And it was getting on my nerves. And I said, I'm going to go to the president's office. And I'm going to complain about the typewriter. assuming that he would kick me out, or you say, no, we can't not have a typewriter because the librarian needs to type. So he said, it's a very simple problem. He said, I will put a felt carpet underneath the typewriter and it'll muffle the noise, won't bother you at all. So I thought it was a remarkable solution to a problem that I never thought he was going to apply a physics principle to what I thought was a political problem at the time. So that stuck with me forever. Just the fact that he thought outside the box. He didn't think like, it was a student coming in here trying to disrupt the way things
He
are
was
working.
interested in satisfying your request.
At the same time, applied his principles of physics, and he did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting.
And you went on to obviously to postgraduate in surgery.
Before I go to that though, I'd
Sure.
like to be sure that I'd like to express my appreciation like for those years. Like for example, Jack Sheehan was our professor of medicine. Dennis McCarthy was a lecturer in professor of physiology. Jack Sheehan, and then Dennis McCarthy was a lecturer in physiology. Professor McConnell was our anatomy teacher, and your grandmother, Fanny Law, taught us histology, and she was wonderful. You would chip off the old block.
Thank you, Pat.
Yes, that's true.
It's good to hear.
So those were the preclinical years at the university, and so those are those memories from those times, and they were excellent, experiences for me. I love them.
And what prompted you to go on to study surgery?
Well, then during the clinical years, we had some very good teachers. I got a chance to work in the South Infirmary with Professor Kiley. P.K. Kiley was the professor of surgery at the time, and some students were allowed to live at the hospital for a month or 2 months or 3 months, which I did. And here he was, a professor of surgery. He was doing brain surgery. He was doing fracture spine surgery. He was doing appendix, gallbladders, all sorts of. I mean, he was covering a whole gamut. Today, most surgeons do one simple area. He was doing the whole gamut. And then his brother, K. John, in Norton Infirmary, was a good art teacher. And then Mr. Kelly at the St. Finbarr's Hospital was a great instructor in the acute abdomen. He taught us a lot about the principles. A fellow called Zachary Cope was the textbook of acute abdomen, and Mr. Kelly was a master at that. He was wonderful. And then on the medical side, excuse me, it was Professor Dennis O'Sullivan, and he was a great inspiration to me. He was really he was a new arrival in Cork at our time, and he had a great idea about teaching, and he was very committed. He knew all our names. He knew where he came from. He had a phenomenal memory, and he taught us a love for medicine, and so it was very, very excellent. And he was very loyal. And then later on in his life, he retired down to Baltimore. So I knew him later on in my years coming home. I would see him like in his retirement condition. Yeah.
He was such an influential man.
Yes.
Had so many people speak, I suppose, lovingly of him actually, and the influence that he had on them.
I remember one time we were in his clinic, and there was this woman from Kerry, and he spent a lot of time with her. And when he finished examining her and giving her instructions, she took out a £5 note and handed it to him, and he gave it back to her. He did not keep it. He just said, "No, I'm happy to take care of you."
I think the rumours have it that you are capable of doing the same thing, but we'll come to that later.
Okay, no problem.
So when you finished, where did you go next?
Well, the thing was, it's interesting because when I finished medicine, I did well on my exams, and Professor O'Sullivan was expecting me to work with him for 6 months at his unit.
Okay.
And I met him that summer in Baltimore because he was living in Baltimore at the time, and I debated with myself if I should stay in Cork or travel. So I spoke to my mom. I said, "Mom, what should I do?" And she said, "You can always come back. You should go now while you have the energy and drive to go and study and come back afterwards." And at the same time, I was a little concerned about working with Professor O'Sullivan because I thought if I worked with him in the hospital as an intern, that he realised I didn't know as much as he thought I knew, and that he would show me up to be not so secure or confident. So I had that concern that maybe I would be a fraud.
That's your humility.
No, but it was a fear, though. It was a legitimate fear that maybe I got good marks in my written test. When it came down to taking care of patients, I might not do so well. So I was kind of, in a way, I wanted to escape that first experience, and that I wouldn't show myself to be not up to par, so to speak. And we had some very good women doctors in those years. Paula Cotter was there with him, and. So there were challenging times, and the students were very bright. Our colleagues were very smart, and the ones a couple of years ahead of us were very, very good. So it was like a hard act to follow in many respects if you were to stay there and work at the unit.
Yeah.
Because he kept the best of the
high standards.
There was a very high standard in St. Finbarr's Hospital in those years. Yeah. And Sheila Boland from Skibbereen was there, and she was very smart too.
Yes.
In those years, so
they're names that we know well.
Yes.
But you spent some time there in Cork in St. Finbarr's,
Well,
And
I was lucky to be in St. Finbarr's because there was a guy called Mikey Gould who administered St. Finbarr's Hospital, and they were short of interns. So I
yeah.
got to work out there for 3 or 4 months above and beyond the requirements of education.
Mm-hmm.
So I was on call. So I would take call, at the fever ward and take call for acute pulmonary edema and take call for various things. And so it was like working as an intern, as a student. And I had very good experience. John Fraher was there at the time as
Oh yeah.
well. So there was a lot of very smart, bright people around. Jim Finucane was there too, I believe, around the same time. Yeah.
So then because you did make a move at some point to the United States.
Well, that was also an interesting principle at the university here. They allowed us to take electives in the summertime.
Okay.
So you could take 3 months and work in any hospital around the world. So I spent 3 months in Detroit when I was about 21, and the
Mm-hmm.
clinics working there at the Mount Carmel University Hospital. It was a wonderful experience. We did emergency medicine, we did emergency room work, radiology. We first assisted surgery, so we had a great experience. And then the next year, I went to London Hospital, Whitechapel, with the cardiology, and then went to Copenhagen, which was Professor Tarnhoy, for a neurosurgery experience. So we had a great opportunity to travel anywhere in the world we wanted to go as part of the UCC educational process.
Okay, so as
So
an undergraduate, you had done
that
all that
was, yeah,
traveling.
absolutely, yes, yes.
Very
And
interesting.
it was allowed, permitted, and actually encouraged.
Okay.
Because in the States, they were hoping that we would come back to work there as interns or short doctors. And several of my class actually came to work there. In fact, ironically, I was at a meeting the other night, just last week in New York, and somebody tapped my shoulder behind me. It was Carmel O'Donovan.
Oh,
And Carmel and I were in the same class here at
in,
UCC,
yeah.
and she's done very well in radiology in New York. It was just a coincidental, big city, but just the same small
Two
place,
Cork
Yeah,
graduates, yeah.
yes,
I suppose at a certain level, though, I mean, the pool gets smaller and
yes.
people are more inclined to meet each other, as you specialise in disciplines. But then you decided, didn't you, to go to the United States and to study, I mean, to immerse yourself more deeply in the discipline of surgery.
I did. What happened there was that when I was in London, the Whitechapel Hospital, the London Hospital in Whitechapel was a very well-known teaching hospital, still is. The doctors there said that the organisation for postgraduate training is far better in the States. In 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
you could come out with a subspecialty of importance, whereas in the British system, it was running from place to place, and there was no structured organisation. It might take 5 or 10 years to accomplish the same endpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So you should go to the States first to get your foundation. You can always come back and do fellowships and break out in certain areas. So they advised me actually to just go right away to the States and get my basic training done there first in surgery or whatever I wanted to do. At that time, I was interested in medicine, and I decided I would do cardiology. But then I realized that you could do both. You could be cardiac surgery and cardiology. You could learn more about things. So I went into surgery with the idea of going into cardiac surgery. But then along the way, things changed. And I remember one time there was a cut in the system. 2 or 3 doctors came back from the war in Vietnam, and they were given priority positioning. And I got cut out of the general surgery program, and then I actually went into orthopedics by default at that time.
Oh, really?
But there was a very strong program in orthopedics at the hospital for special surgery where I work right now, and there was an opening there, and I got into that slot, fortunately. So it was a good default situation.
Is it fair to say that the Hospital for Special Surgery is the leading orthopaedic hospital in the world?
Well, I can't speak for the world or for individuals, but it's regarded by the standards in the United States as being the #1 orthopedic hospital in the States right now.
Okay.
It ties with the Mayo Clinic. Some years it goes back and forth, but
Mhm.
currently it's #1 in orthopedics, and it's very high in rheumatology as well. So it's a very good, huge training program. But everywhere you go there in this country and in the world, for that matter, you see excellent doctors and great work. But it's just globally, it measures out in many different parameters. But for postgraduate education, beyond like the basic trainings in orthopedics, they do spine, they do joint replacement, they do sports medicine. So there's a lot of extra work, and so we see a ton of foreign postgraduate doctors coming there for increased training in the various disciplines in orthopedics and spine.
And you were certainly for a time head of the spine service there, weren't you?
I did that for a while. In fact, when I became chief of the spine service at Hospital for Special Surgery, nobody wanted a job. It was being run by a colleague of mine who was a joint replacement doctor, and as soon as I came, he said, "Okay, you're here now. You take it over. You do it." And at that time, it wasn't really of much interest. And then, as the years came on, it became more and more of a focal point.
Mm-hmm.
And then at one point in time, where either it was a combination of political or philosophical differences, I relinquished that position because I just wanted to be freelance. I didn't want to go to all the conferences and give talks and papers and do research. I felt that was not my area of interest. Now my interest was just surgical technology and patient care management. So I spoke to the director at that time, Dr. Warren, and I thought it'd be better if he would appoint somebody else that role. And so I stayed on as a spine surgeon on the spine service all those subsequent years. And I to travel to various centers in the States and learn surgical techniques. I go to Germany with Professor Harms and Zilke in Germany. So I traveled to a lot of the various. I went to France as well, and Hospital Cochin in Paris, and multiple centers in the States to just learn, because this was a time when spine surgery was really evolving into a real huge discipline over in the 80s and 90s. It was very few people were interested in it, especially by themselves. They were always doing spine and something else, but then it grew out of a combination of technology and CAT scan, MRI scan, and the technology of implants in the spine, which were developed mostly initially in France, perfected in Germany, and then added on to in the States. But the French were very good in putting in screws into the spine, where we thought in those years initially it was too dangerous, and the French sort of led the way, and then the Germans sort of perfected it, and then it became common practice now. Everybody does it now, but in those years it was very challenging to break that barrier to do. Putting screws around the nerves, around the spinal cord, it was very frightening initially.
I can well imagine it.
Yeah.
I mean, there are those, and you can block your ears in this one, but there's a view held that you would be, if not the best, amongst the very best in spinal surgeon in the world, Pat. And the question I have for you, I'm not going to ask you to deny that or to confirm it, but the question I'm going to ask you is, what is it that I suppose motivates you? You're working on a part of the body that even the mention of the word spine gives us all a chill in the spine.
Yeah.
And it really is a very, very delicate business. And, the risks associated with for the patient, can be quite grave. Can you talk me through that? I mean, the person who is this surgeon.
Okay. So when I finished my orthopedic training at the Hospital for Special Surgery, I spoke to the director at that time, Dr. Wilson, and I said, I'd like to, if possible, come back to work here. So he said, we need people in spine and in tumors and in feet. So I said, well, I don't want to do tumors, I don't want to do feet, so I'll do spine. So he told me to go and train in spine. So I did a year in Toronto, University of Toronto, with Dr. Simmons, who was the #1 spine surgeon at that time in North America, in my opinion, and a lot of other people's as well. He was a really outstanding spine surgeon, and he was doing very complicated work, and people were coming from all over the world to his clinics to be operated upon. So I spent a year with him. And my only regret that I didn't spend more time with him, because you sign on for a year, and halfway through that year, the next guy signs on for the next year, so the spot is gone. By the time you realize how good it was too late to reapply, so to speak. So that happened, and then I came back to New York to work, and initially I did general orthopedics and spine, but after the first 5 years, there were very few designated spine surgeons in New York, so I decided to just stick with spine. And then I took an interest in it, and I learned more and more, and I traveled more and more, and I spoke to my colleagues, and as we got more information and more knowledge and more demand, it became more interesting. So it was like a fever almost of spine interest at that time, those earlier years. I'm talking about like the mid-80s and 90s. Yeah.
And what do you rely on for that? We'll call it balance, It's a very focused, intense profession that you have chosen. So what is it that...
Well, I never claimed to be in balance, as I can imagine. Like, we never really were very balanced. We were working too many hours and still do, doing too many operations maybe, but and trying to go to enough meetings and trying to read the journals and try to stay informed. And sometimes the balance with your family and your personal philosophy and your work, the work came first, I think, a lot of the time in those earlier years. You just put in the hours and the time, and I neglected my children or my wife necessarily, but it was just that I don't think I balanced the time very well. On the other hand, if you wanted to be successful at the spine surgery at that point in time, you couldn't work 5 days a week and expect to do that. So it was a challenge to do that, and a lot of the doctors, including myself, got into domestic troubles because of that not being home enough. So.
And would that be something that you might account for? I understand that you are now married for the second time.
Yes.
Is that something you might account for your first?
Well, I think my first wife, Susan, I think she felt that I put the work first, the church second, and the farm third. She was fourth.
Okay.
I don't think I did that, but that was her perspective of things, But it was just a statement. But anyway, we're still friends. It's just that she wanted out, basically, after a certain period of time.
But I
I
think
think, did you ever meet Susan?
I never met
Oh,
Susan, but
yes.
I certainly
Oh,
have
yes.
met Jill
Yeah,
and
yes.
your year and a half year old Sam.
Yes.
But the going back, Pat, because I know from you that spirituality and that is also a very important part of your life.
Yeah, well, I think that's very true. I mean, when I was leaving home, my mom was 43, and she gave me a copy of the St. Matthew's Gospel, a pocket edition, my short pocket edition. And next day she was in a car accident and she died. It was a very tragic experience. And so she had a religious curiosity, and as I also at that time. And so that was part of my interest in life. And I think even to this day, like I think the way you live your life is very very important. We all fall short and make mistakes, but I think it's important to develop your character, develop integrity, develop honesty. I mean, these things they don't happen by themselves. You really have to make an effort to stay on the right track, and we often get off track from time to time. We just need to get back on again. So I've always felt that it's important to use the character and do the right thing, basically. And sometimes it's politically not expedient to do that. Machiavelli never advised that, but nonetheless, I think the challenge of life is to live a good life, basically. At the end of your time, not to look back and say, I cheated or was dishonest, because I think that to me would be sad.
Well, it's a very, very good philosophy. And I mean, that coupled to your experience and your education, what would you say to people today who are considering studying medicine, or even to individuals who shortly will graduate?
Well, I mean, I think it's a nerve-expanding field, and
Uh-huh.
nowadays things will change dramatically. Next, generation of doctors, you'll have nanotechnology, you'll have molecular genetic technology and skill and understanding. People will be able to look at your genetic profile and predict what disease you're going to get and anticipate how to treat them, prevent a lot of stuff we see right now. So I think that the human genome, foundation for illness and health and for genetics, I think is just going to expand enormously. And plus,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have genetic engineering to correct the defects as well. So I mean, the crude surgery we do right now with screws and bolts and nuts and scissors and knives. I mean, those days will end eventually, and it'll be all a different computerized, analyzed system that will be very scientific.
Do you think because I think it's important, I suppose, for the students who will certainly be very keen to hear what you said. Do you think that you make your own fortune, or do you find yourself by default in places where opportunities present themselves? What's your philosophy of life in that sense?
Well, first of all, I never planned to be where I am right now. It just
Okay.
happened along the way. So
Mm-hmm.
it happened. I happened into spine. I happened into the hospital special surgery. I happened into various things. So they say fortune favors the prepared mind, but honestly, it was not something I set out to do. There was no roadmap, and you just have to analyze your situation from time to time and see where you are and where you belong, and you can look at the factors around you and the country where I live and work and practice, and what's good for your family and what's good for your own personal peace of mind. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that I find peace of mind in surgery because I enjoy the interviews with patients. I enjoy going to the operating room. I enjoy the excellent technology from the anesthesia we have right now. We can do very complex operations very safely because of very good anesthesia. And we have a very good reporter in the operating room.
Mm-hmm.
And we also had the postgraduate option to train the young doctors from all over the world. I mean, right now we have doctors from Jordan, from Israel, from Ireland. In fact, Paul Kiley, whose grandfather was my teacher, is
Yes.
currently one of our postgraduate students at the same hospital I work right now. And
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 he's
his cousin, you know, Edward Colley received this award a couple of years ago,
that's
and Edward
correct.
and I were in the same class in medical school at those years.
And
So
his other first cousin is a young Patrick Kiley who is a pediatric orthopedic surgeon
in
in
doing
Our Lady's
spine in
Hospital
Cork,
for.
in Dublin,
Yeah, that's right,
That's
Crumlin.
right,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
right. So the Colleys have been around in our lives forever in that regard, and they're a major medical family in Cork, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Um, I suppose just in our concluding remarks, Pat, it's an absolute pleasure. You've been an incredible, I suppose, source of inspiration for so many people. But on behalf of the university, you've been exceptionally loyal and supportive of it. And I know that you've always had almost an open door policy in terms of helping the students, the graduates, when they've come to New York and so on. You just mentioned Paul, for example. Have you found the global network of 100,000 alumni of benefit to you or not?
Well, I think I should be more ability to that, and that to me in this time in my life. You understand? And honestly, in the beginning of our careers, we didn't know much about it. We were just so busy, preoccupied with our work that it's only lately in the latter years of my practice I come to know about this organization. I haven't really been so actively involved as I should be. I'm happy to be part of it, yeah, and more of a part of it. Going
Yeah.
forward, I think rather than to lean on it to help me, I should maybe be a contributor and maybe a guider to some of the other students who may have interest in my area of work, for example.
Excellent. And
Yeah.
just again, I suppose a parting comment, you know, what, right now, and you mentioned it to me earlier, that perhaps one's alma mater becomes more important to them as they get older.
Well, that's true. I mean, it's like the student who comes home from college finds his parents get smarter every year. As you get older, you look back and you see what had a foundation for you. And I think we had a foundation of basic integrity. I think the doctors here that I worked with when I was a student, they were honest, they were hardworking, they were sincere. There was no guile, and I felt, that they gave us a very good foundation. And I look, you appreciate your foundations more. You get as you get closer to the end of your life, you look back and see what caused you to be where you are, and you'll become more appreciative actually of that, and then less so as you go on. So I think it's important to do that, and I think that we need to gather in the diaspora of various dispersed people all over, and bring them back, for honors or for accolades or just for basic discussion and dialogue and communication. Because I think a lot of them have done a lot of good things and they remain quiet. I've often quoted the verse, "For many a flower is born to blossom unseen,
And
and loses
waste
sweetness in
sweetness
the
on the
desert air."
desert
So
air.
there are a lot of very good people out there doing marvelous work, and they have not gotten the limelight, so to speak, that we've gotten here today.
And what does this award mean to you?
Primarily, I think it means an opportunity to say thank you. That's the most important thing to me. It's an opportunity to come back and say thank you to the university, thank you to Eugene especially, and to Professor President Murphy, and to also to the Cork where I grew up.
Mm.
And I think that's the most important thing of all to me, is to come back and have that experience, to say thank you.
Well, it's been an absolute
Yeah,
pleasure, as always, to
thank you.
chat to you, Pat. And just to say that Dr. Patrick O'Leary will receive the 2013 UCC Alumni Achievement Award from the College of Medicine and Health for his work as a world leading spinal surgeon and as a wonderful individual that, that we can boast as one of our own at UCC. So thank you very much.